Have two sources of guidance. The Quran, which we believe is divine revelation from God, as we believe the Gospel in Aramaic was divine revelation to Jesus from God, and it was revealed through Archangel Gabriel. And we have two sources of guidance, the Quran and the Hadith, which are the narrations or teachings of Prophet Muhammad. The basic teaching of Islam is to worship one God and to do good to humanity. As Mark said, we like to use the word Allah because Allah cannot be gendered or pluralized. So God is Ilah in Arabic, whereas Allah means the one God. Okay, it's very similar to Aramaic and Hebrew. If you go back to the New Testament, in the part that's related about Jesus on the cross, the words that are used in the New Testament of what he said was Elo, Elo, lama sabachthani, which is his use of Elo is similar to Allah, the one God. And in Hebrew, Elohim is the plural, or the majestic plural, if you will, for God. So Elohim. Okay, you can see the similarity in the Semitic languages. Islam simply means submission, and it comes from the root word salam, which means peace. And so it means achieving peace within oneself and one's community through submission to the will of God. Okay, that's the true definition of it. And a Muslim then is one who submits to the will of God. Okay? So the misperceptions come from the fact that 62% of Americans have never met a Muslim. Okay? And soon after 9/11, the concern was that in November of 2001, there was a Time magazine poll showing that 17% of people had a negative impression of Islam. And despite all of these open houses and everything else we are doing, in 2011, that number had gone up to 40%, had a negative view of Islam. And so that's why we realized that it's very important that we come and talk to you about Islam, and that we do it in every forum possible, so that if there are questions and concerns, we can air them in the comfort of friends. Why is this? It is largely due to a false portrayal of Islam and confusion regarding, as Mariam said, some cultural issues. For example, female circumcision is attributed to Islam when it was happening way before Islam was a cultural practice of Africa at that time, and was practiced by Coptic Christians way before Islam came. So that's gotten attributed to Islam, although it has nothing to do with Islam. And also political conflicts have been confused with Islam. For example, as you know, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, for example, started after we invaded Iraq. Al-Qaeda in Iraq started, and ISIS, as you know, is a morph of that initial organization. And we understand that that was a Sunni reaction to the fact that we replaced the Sunni army of Saddam Hussein with a Shia army. And so the Sunni went underground, started a civil war, and this morphed into ISIS. And so this is a political conflict, and even though they try to fool us by using the word Islamic, it has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. And you'll see this happening a lot in many conflicts. So very quickly, going back to Mark's 6 points, the major principles of belief in one God, belief in the angels, and I want you to think about how much we have in common with Judaism and Christianity in particular. Belief in the angels, from Angel Gabriel to the guardian angels that are praying constantly for all of us. The holy books, from the Torah to the Psalm to the Gospel to the Quran, as they were revealed to their original messengers, we believe that those were divine books. All the messengers, including Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all, a day of judgment or account, we have that in Christianity as well as in Orthodox Judaism. And the power to do good and bad is from God, but we have complete freedom within the bounds of God's complete control. Okay, so our birth and our death are not in our control, but within the bounds of what God gives us control, we have complete freedom. The pillars of faith, once again, I want to draw you to the first pillar, which says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, which is not simply I believe in God. It means I bear witness that there is none worthy of being worshipped but the one God. Think about that. In a court of law, the highest level of certainty is bearing witness. So a Muslim has to be so certain of his faith that it's only then that they can accept Islam. So the confusion about forcing people at the point of sword is completely alien to Islam. You have to be completely certain through God's divine book, as well as all the miracles around you, that you believe that there is none worthy of being worshipped but the one God. Okay? And the second part of that is that I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God because he brought this book to us, and we see no faults in that book, which is the Quran. The prayer 5 times a day, the charity, the fasting, the pilgrimage. Mark went through all of those, but these are the 5 pillars. And variations of these, once again, are common to Judaism and Christianity. Prayer is common, fasting is common, giving in charity is common. So the theme, basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that we have much more in common that divides us. There's very little that divides us, and so we have to keep that in mind all the time. So one of the hot topics or misperceptions is about Sharia, and so let me spend a little time on that. Sharia basically, in translation, means the path. And it means the path to the watering hole, because that's where they used to take their sheep to quench their thirst. Now, in Islam, Sharia means the path to salvation. Okay, so it comes from that root word, the path to the watering hole, but in Islam it means the path to salvation. Sharia is not law. Okay, so that's another big misperception. Sharia are the guidelines that come from our 2 sources of worship, our 2 sources of guidance, which is the Quran and the Hadith. Okay, so those are the sources of guidance, and that is what Sharia is. It shows us the ethical and moral principles to live life in the best way we can under God's guidance, and it includes prayer and fasting, but it also guides towards punishment for crimes. Okay, so unfortunately, when we see Sharia being introduced on Fox News, we see an Afghani woman being stoned to death in some village, and that is what we call vigilantism, right? It has nothing to do with Islam, because Islam doesn't allow for any person to just take the life of a woman. In fact, there is no part of the Quran in translation that talks about stoning to death. It is in fact in the Old Testament, but never mentioned in the Quran. Okay? So then where does law come from? It's a dynamic system of using Sharia guidelines from the Quran and the Hadith to come up with laws based on local circumstances and what we have in America, right? So in America, there's a Fiqh Council of North America, and it's used mostly in moon sighting for the month of fasting and mostly theological issues, but in Muslim countries, it takes on much more than that. But it's a dynamic law that changes depending on where you are. So for example, Sharia guidance does not include when to extubate a patient in the intensive care unit, right? So a council of scholars of Islam will sit together and come up with those rules, and that's the fiqh, or those are the laws that we abide by. Okay, so you got the difference between guidelines and the law, and Sharia are the guidelines from the 2 sources of guidance. There are 6 principles of Sharia, and as you look at this, think about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because you don't see Muslims going around saying, we want Sharia in America, right? You see the opposite. You see people saying, no Sharia in America. So it's a backward thing, and this is based on Islamophobia. This fear of Islam has driven people to come up with these fearful things, but look at the guidelines that are part of Sharia. The right to protection of life, and these have not been made up by me, these are by scholars who use these guidelines to come up with rules, right? The right to protection of life, the right to protection of your family, the right to protection of education for all, the right to protection of religious freedom for all, the right to protection of your property, and the right to protection of your human dignity and honor. So those are the 6 principles of Sharia, and if you look at the Bill of Rights, it's very, very similar to our Constitution and Bill of Rights. So you can see what the hoopla is. It's an Arabic term, and therefore it can be, nobody knows in America what the meaning of it is, and therefore it's taken a life of its own, completely different from what it's meant to be. Similarly, the concept of jihad. Jihad means to struggle, to strive, to be the best person you can be, and it includes the ethical, moral standards of life, and to change the world for the better. The equivalent of Judaism is tikkun olam, which is to make the world a better place. So on an individual